Greetings. My name is Lauren. It is a joy to introduce to you my friend, Dr. Jabbour, a distinguished professor with a doctorate in Islamic studies. I invited him to read to you passages from his book, Unshackled and Growing. A PDF version of the entire book in English is available to you for free on the website friendshippathways.com. You may also access past episodes there. I present to you the episode, The Proof About Jesus.
The proof about Jesus. Many people believe that there is no solid evidence for the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ. They assume there is no proof for the authenticity of Christ as he is presented in the New Testament. At a certain time in my life, I had my doubts too. Many years ago, I read a book titled The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, and it motivated me to write this chapter. Before writing his book, Strobel wanted to prove that any evidence for Christ could not be believed and that what the Bible said about him was wrong. As I read this book, I kept thinking how Strobel's questions reminded me of so many of my Muslim friends' questions about Christ. Was Jesus really the person the Bible says he was? Did he really die on the cross? Can the Bible be trusted? And perhaps most important, what does Maryam, Surah 19, verse 33 mean, where Jesus talked about his own birth, death, and resurrection in the Quran? Here's some background to Strobel's book. Lee Strobel, an American journalist who considered himself an atheist, wrote the book The Case for Christ in 1998. Prior to that, he worked at the well-known Chicago Tribune newspaper, where his specialty was covering big court cases. Before researching the book, he believed there was far more evidence that God was merely a product of wishful thinking, ancient mythology, and primitive superstition. What Jesus said about himself, Strobel believed, was nothing more than the invention of superstitious people. But then Strobel's wife became a follower of Jesus Christ. That stunned him, and he worried that she might become legalistic and narrow-minded. To his surprise, he noticed instead that fundamental changes took place in her character, integrity, and self-confidence. Wanting to discover what was behind these changes, he launched an all-out investigation into the facts surrounding Christ and the Bible. His search took place over a period of approximately 2 years. In his own words, he explains his objective this way: setting aside my self-interest and prejudices as best as I could, I read books, interviewed experts, asked questions, analyzed history, explored archaeology, studied ancient literature, and for the first time in my life picked apart the Bible, verse by verse. I plunged into the case with more vigor than with any case I have ever pursued. With a journalist's mind, Strobel dared to ask every imaginable question as he interviewed the top experts in the world. I was amazed by the extent of his questions and by the degree to which he did not leave any stone unturned. Strobel wanted to disprove Christ, but every question he asked was fully answered. His conclusions differed radically from what he had anticipated, and he ended up writing an entire book that makes a case for Christ. My friend, if you are struggling with questions about Jesus, I encourage you to read the book, The Case for Christ. Although the book is not written specifically for Muslims, I am confident that most, if not all, of your questions will be answered. Here are some of the main questions it addressed. Can biographies of Jesus be trusted? Do the biographies of Jesus stand up to scrutiny? Were Jesus' biographies reliably preserved for us? Is there credible evidence for Jesus outside his biographies? Does archaeology confirm or contradict Jesus' biographies? Is the Jesus of history the same as the Jesus of faith? Was Jesus really convinced that he was the Son of God? Was Jesus crazy when he claimed to be the Son of God? Did Jesus fulfill the attributes of God? Did Jesus and Jesus alone match the identity of the Messiah? Was Jesus' death a sham and his resurrection a hoax? Was Jesus' body really absent from his tomb? Was Jesus seen alive after his death on the cross? Are there any supporting facts that point to the resurrection? What does the evidence establish, and what does it mean today? There is nothing wrong with honest doubt. As it did in Strobel's case, it can lead to searching and serious study, and finally it can lead to certainty. On the other hand, when people close their minds because of fear or fanaticism, they are left with only stagnation and sterile religiosity. One of the best places to look for proof about Jesus is the Old Testament, which contains prophecies written about Christ centuries before his birth.